welcome to another episode of the Preparedness Podcast. My name is Rob Hannes, and I'll be the host. Today on the Preparedness Podcast, we have a special guest, Mr. Fred Hentz. Fred is one of the organizers for the local Meetup group, Preparedness 101. If you go to meetup.com and search for Preparedness 101, you'll find the group. If you're not familiar with meetup.com, it's a website where you can go and find people that have similar interests and figure out, a way for you guys to meet, and you can talk and do projects and stuff together. And it's a neat little website where you can find like-minded people. If you go look on the site, you'll find there are several different types of groups out there. A lot of them are orientated towards preparedness and survival, including those specifically for preparedness and survival. But it's one of those places that we had talked about in the networking show where you can go to find like-minded people and still maintain some level of anonymity so that you don't have to tell everybody who you are and where you live and stuff. So unless you're an organizer, which is something you can do too, you can sign up to start a meetup group. But if you're just going to one of the groups, typically you can pretty much remain very cautious and not have to give out a lot of information. And I think it's one of the better ways to use meetup.com. Now, the Preparedness 101 meetup group is probably the biggest preparedness group in the state of Arizona. Now, I've been a member of this meetup group since it started 15 or 16 months ago. That's where I first met Fred. And I was very impressed on how he was able to present the preparedness information that he was teaching in a very easy-to-learn manner. It was very down-to-earth. There was nothing extremist about it. It was just solid, good preparedness information. And over the preceding months, we struck up a friendship. And lately, one of the things that Fred's been trying to figure out how to do is how to get more information to new members. Now, when we first started this meetup, there was only like 22 people that showed up. And now, like I said, there's over 300 members. In fact, the number of people that show up is so large that we have to have these meetings twice a month. It's the same actual training, but in two different locations so that we can fit more people in. And one of the things that we've been trying to figure out is how we can get more information to more people. And so I thought it would be a good idea to bring Fred on, and what we can do is use this podcast as a venue to help the new members, get up to speed on some of the information. Now, I thought this would be a good venue because, well, this is the Preparedness Podcast. Fred's teaching preparedness information. I'm like, hey, this stuff kind of goes together. I'm going to bring Fred on here in just a minute. I just want to go over the sponsor for the podcast, and that is buyemergencyfoods.com. You've heard us talk about food storage. You've heard us talk about why it's important to be prepared and all the reasons that we foresee coming up. Really, you need to sit down, and you need to sit down with your family and figure out what is going to work for you for food storage. And you need to, put it into your budget, put in your plan that you need to get some stuff. I like the Buy Emergency Foods food because it's long-term, it's packaged well, it tastes really good, it's easy to make. And now they even have GMO-free food. They've got stuff for vegetarians, and it's really worthwhile to check out. I've had a bunch of the food myself. I like the food. My kids will eat the food, which I think is really important. Now is the time to get your food storage together before the prices go up, because we know inflation's coming. BuyEmergencyFoods.com. Okay, I'm going to bring Fred on, and I want to mention, though, that this is the first time I'm actually recording two live mics at the same time, and so we might have a bit of an audio issue, so I appreciate your patience with this. Fred, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Fred, let's start with, why don't you tell us what Preparedness 101 is, why you started the group, and what you're hoping to accomplish with it.
Well, it's really simple. Really, Preparedness 101 is trying to get information to people. When I started this, it was kind of my own little quest. I was out looking for information. I went to different types of groups, some religious, some political, some, it seemed like everybody either had an agenda or was trying to sell something. And I was really dissatisfied with the information that was out there. Either things were just kind of haphazardly put together. They would promise, I kind of felt the bait and switch. They would promise you information one way, and I just didn't feel I was getting anything. So one day I literally sat in my living room and said, I think I can do better. And I found the Meetup forum and started from there. I organized the Preparedness 101, and one of our, or I would say two of our major rules are that we do not discuss any politics and we don't discuss any religion. We look at preparedness as not having an agenda. If preparing is going to give you a peace of mind, politics and religion really have nothing to do with it. And we try to just bring people the information that they need, and they request. We get requests on all sorts of topics, and we sit down, we look at the topics, and we say, well, hey, we can either bring people in to teach. We've had some professionals come in and give some of the meetups. Other information between myself and the other organizers, Rob, you're one of them. We bring people in that have a niche within a topic and can speak well about it, and we bring people the information. We try to keep it very simple. We try to make sure that people leave feeling reassured that they can do these things. Preparedness, we look at it from a real basic level and try to make sure that people have just basic skills. So in the event something happens, it doesn't have to be cataclysmic. It can just be anything from a job loss to, if something really does happen, if we have a power outage, and that people can get by and feel good about themselves. That's really what the whole thing is about.
Okay. And as being a member, I can definitely attest that the whole the no religion, no politics is working really well. It keeps the discussions down, except for that was at one group, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, we had a group that came in and sat down. It was 3 or 4 people came in and sat down, and the minute I covered that we will not be discussing any politics or religion, they literally just got up and walked right out.
Yeah, we never did figure out what their agenda was.
No.
But now you've been organizing this for a little over a year now. What are some of the challenges that you're facing in managing a group this big?
Well, honestly, I never expected it to get this big. I was tickled pink at the very first meeting when we had, I think we had 15 people, not counting myself and Kat, our other organizer. And I was tickled pink. I thought, wow, here people showed up. Everybody seemed fairly normal. And I was surprised. I never honestly expected it to get this big. Now that we have gotten this big, the problems we face are having venues where we can hold the classes and not charge. That's one of our key things is all the information we give is 100% free. We don't charge an entrance fee. We don't charge a membership. The actual cost to have a meetup group, I pay for that out of my pocket. And the challenge is now becoming how can we house these people during class. My work had stepped up, and we have a conference room that'll accommodate about 30. We've outgrown that. Kat's work can accommodate upwards of 100. The problem is it's significantly farther into Phoenix than what a lot of the people like to travel. So those are the challenges we're facing right now, is just kind of growing pains, I guess you could say.
Right. Well, it's good to kind of have growing pains, because I've noticed that a lot of the people that show up, it's not always the same. It changes. Not everybody can make the same meeting time every month. But what I found is that these people seem to be very interested in learning preparedness. I wasn't really expecting it. I didn't know what to expect when I went to the first meeting with stuff, and that's why I was really surprised. I walked out there going, wow, these guys have their act together, and this is some good information. I'm definitely going to go to the next one. But over the past year or so, seeing other people that are there, I'm really impressed. These people are really there to learn. They're taking it very seriously. It's typically an older crowd. It doesn't seem to be. I mean, there's a few people that are under 30, but I would say most are probably over 30. And when I take a head count, it's at least 50% women, right?
Oh yes, actually, the majority of our members are women. I think we're pretty close to 2/3 of our members are women.
Yeah, I found that surprising, and I don't mean to be, a male chauvinist pig over it. I guess I just didn't expect. I guess I just expected more men were in this because of the topics, guns and hunting and stuff like that. I just assumed that most would be male, but they're not, and that's what I thought was really, really interesting.
Well, one of the things that I've found in talking to the ladies is that it's empowering for them to know that they don't have to rely on somebody else, that they are themselves becoming self-reliant. And whether that means, learning how to shoot a gun or learning how to, store food or cook food or, it is very empowering for them is what they've kind of relayed to me.
Why do you think people are joining? I mean, why do you think that the numbers are growing so big? I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked lately, but I know it's well over 300 now. And the turnouts continue to be fairly strong. Usually it seems that people show up and then it kind of peters out and the group dies, whereas your group, on the other hand, just continues to grow. Why do you think that might be?
Well, I think, one, word of mouth. The Meetup venue is good, but a lot of our members come to us simply because they've heard from another person in the group, and we provide information, like I said, without agenda, without cost, which is a huge thing when you think about it. A lot of people out there want to charge or sell you something, and I think not only that, but we live in uncertain times, and we are not by any means any kind of doom and gloom type of group, as you know. We don't focus on what can happen. We simply focus on solutions, broad solutions. So if these are your fears, these are your top 3 fears, how can you put together a plan that'll cover those 3 concerns or fears? And I think since we do it in a non-threatening, non-doom and gloom, the sky is falling kind of venue, people feel more at ease.
I have to agree that that's probably a big part of it. I know that is a big aspect to me, is that, again, you're not pushing any agenda. You're not saying, oh, it's the Mayan 2012 issue or it's a solar flare issue. It's and this is how I look at preparedness in general, is like there are so many things that can happen, but quite honestly, they probably won't. You just don't know what's going to happen, and it pays to be prepared. This is one of the things that I constantly talk about on the podcast is be prepared. Just, it doesn't have to be for one specific thing. Be prepared for just about anything that happens. One of the reasons I wanted to cover the meetup like we have been is because if you are thinking about starting a meetup, or if you have a preparedness related meetup, Fred has agreed to go ahead and you can contact him if you'd like and ask him questions about some of the issues he's had to deal with, and maybe some ideas or advice on how to set up a meetup and make it so that it's comfortable for everybody. But instead of trying to give out his email on the podcast, because there's a lot of letters that sound the same, like F's and S's, just go to the post on the website at thepreparednesspodcast.com for this episode, and I'll have his email in there, and you can just go ahead and contact him through the website. Okay, so Fred, I think we've covered already why people prep, because the things that they're concerned about and why they're joining the group. One of the first things you talk about in the first class that you did is what to expect in a major disaster. So let's start with that.
Okay. So what I think is a lot of people don't realize is that in a major disaster, exactly how they unfold, and no 2 disasters are the same. And I think a lot of it has to do also with the fact that you have different cultures, whether it's American culture or any other culture around the world. Everybody deals with disaster differently. And Americans have a tendency not to deal well with bad situations. When you look at Katrina, when you look at some of the earthquakes that have happened in California, I know personally the earthquake that happened in Oakland in '89 when I was in the service, we went and helped out up there. We were having, ambulances, military ambulances stolen right out of under our noses. Who steals an ambulance during an earthquake? And so looking at that, I think people don't want to look at the scary or the bad side. And like I said, I try not to paint a picture of gloom and doom, but I think people need to realize that during disasters, it can either bring out the best in people, and the flip side of that is it can also bring out the worst in people.
Now, when you were in the earthquake and other areas, what do you see mostly? Because the ones I've been experiencing, the disasters I've been in, people have helped each other. I really haven't seen much bad, but yet, you got like Katrina and that aspect. So, in your experience, what do you see and where do you see it break down, and what are maybe the warning signs to look for?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the part of country that you're in. First of all, California, they're used to having stuff like this. So I think people have a tendency to pull more together, help out one another. It's something that does happen often enough that people remember. When you start having disasters in other parts of the country that aren't used to having or dealing with those situations, I think that's where you have a lot of unknowns. It's not that New Orleans wasn't used to having hurricanes or dealing with bad storms. You're just looking at it had a situation that compounded one thing on top of the other. And so it made a bad situation worse. And I think a lot of it has to do also when people look at a situation and they almost feel that it's hopeless. I think that's when people do things that they wouldn't normally do. They cross that line.
Now, how do you recommend that people handle a disaster? So when the tornado or the earthquake or whatever it is, what are you telling people to do?
Well, I think first of all, people have to acknowledge what it is that they're fearful of. They have to acknowledge what is realistic for that part of the country that they're in. For instance, living in Phoenix, Arizona, it's hot. We don't have tornadoes. We don't have hurricanes. Arizona does have earthquakes on occasion, but typically not down where we're at. So what exactly can we expect? Well, a disaster here would be loss of power in the summertime. No air conditioning alone would be a disaster in itself. Especially, on our hot summers when we're running 120 degrees plus, that could be fatal for a lot of people. So I think you have to, one, sit down, look at what is possible for your area. Then you have to look at what are things that scare you. I mean, really, preparedness is about having a peace of mind. You have things set aside. It makes you feel better. So in the event something does happen, you can better handle it. And so in doing that, you gotta look at the kind of the dark side, the scary side, just a little bit, acknowledge it, and then you have to build a plan. And the plan is really the major part of getting through a disaster.
So let's talk about the plan. How should people go about starting to make their preparedness plan?
Well, there's a couple different ways to do it. I think keeping it simple is really the best. The most complicated plans, like anything else that's complicated, it doesn't take much to mess it up. So if you keep it very, very simple, when I was in the service, we had the acronym KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And I think that really applies to this. So you get yourself a piece of paper, make a couple of columns, write down the things that you see as potential, and start looking at the overlap. For instance, say you're in an area where you have tornadoes. You have power outages as a result of maybe tornadoes. All these different things, list them out. Then you start saying, okay, so if I store water, water will cover me in case there's a tornado. Water will cover me in case we have a power outage, so on and so forth. And you start looking at what items overlap the different situations. food, having food stored. I'm not a big proponent of storing a lot of food. I personally, I'm always saying that 4 months is a lot of food to store. If you really have 4 months worth of food stored, I'll tell you why. Anything more than 4 months, and you have to have somebody home or at the house literally managing it. They're a storekeeper. They have to rotate it. They have to keep inventory. So for me, 4 months is kind of a key thing.
Now, this is not long-term storage food, but you're talking about like pantry food, the stuff you eat every day, the stuff
Correct.
You would go to the grocery store and you'd buy. 4 months of that is what you're referring to, it having to constantly rotate through that stock and,
Exactly.
and make sure that you're not forgetting things on the back shelf and stuff.
Yes.
Okay. The overlap that you talk about was one of the things that I clued in on at that first meeting because that's very much how I look at it, in that you don't have to have a separate plan for every event. You have your common stuff. You take care of your common stuff. For most events, whether it's an earthquake or tornado, a power outage, anything like that, you're going to need food, you're going to need water, you're going to need heat, you're going to need shelter. And so you can take care of those without having to plan, okay, for a tornado, I'm going to need 5 days of food. And for an earthquake, I should have 14 days of food. And, you don't need to break it up and make it that complicated.
Exactly. That's like I said, it's all about keeping it really, really simple.
Okay, and the next step?
Well, after you get your plan together, you got to start looking at, okay, what is it that you're planning for? What are the basic items that, like you said, will cross over each section? Then you look at each different situation and look and see if there's any kind of specialized items that you may need for that situation. For instance, and you know what, it's absolutely okay for you to not plan for certain specific situations that come up. I'll give you an example. My personal plan. I have nothing in my plan for myself or my family in the event there's some type of biological or chemical type of attack. First of all, it would be very small or limited if it was chemical. If it's biological and we're looking at having to wear gas masks the rest of our lives, we're really not sure. And we sat down and discussed it as a family and said, we're just going to omit that. If something, someone introduces some virus into the atmosphere and it wipes out the population, kind of like what we see a lot of movies are based on, and we succumb, hey, so be it. We succumb. We accept that, and it's okay to accept those types of things. You don't have to say, well, I'm a survivalist, or I'm a prepper and I have to prepare for everything. No, that's not it at all. You pick and choose. This is your plan. You pick and choose what it is you want to survive. I mean, some of this stuff is really, really scary for some people to look at, and some people right off the bat will tell you, well, I don't want to survive that. And you know what? That's okay.
Yeah, I see a lot of people who I think get stressed out or they get overly concerned because they're having a hard time trying to prepare for everything that they can think of. That they get in this mode where they start this thinking process, and I'm sure you've done it as well as all of our listeners, where basically, you think of one thing and you start thinking of others, and that leads to, oh, then there's this, oh, and then there's this and this. And, I've seen people, not that they've had a breakdown, but they really start to have kind of an anxiety over, gee, how do I prepare for all of these events? I can't afford this. I can't do this. I don't even know what to look for in this event. And I think it's an important aspect that, it's okay if you don't know. And if you want to either A, say, you know what, I'm not going to worry about this, or I'm not going to worry about this now. Take care of the stuff that you can, because there's a lot of common elements that if you prepare for this and this and this, chances are you're going to be fairly well prepared for,
Exactly.
that and that and that.
Yes. That's a big part of it, is looking at looking at the scary stuff. I think that's why so many people, it's pretty much a cut and dry number. You either have people that are willing to be prepared and they're willing to take that look into the dark, the unknown, and say, okay, if something happens, I want to be prepared. And then you have other people that I think like living in denial, like that level of what I don't know really won't hurt me. The problem is that most of your disasters, people survive. I mean, when you look at some of the most horrendous disasters that have happened, people still survive these disasters. People survive terrorist attacks. People survive tsunamis. The chances of you surviving something that happens is more than you not surviving something that happens. And I think that's what people don't realize, is that in preparing, you're not really looking at, I want something bad to happen. You're simply just telling yourself, hey, I attribute it to this. Do you have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen?
Yep.
Okay. Have you ever had a fire in your kitchen?
Nope.
Okay. I have a fire extinguisher in my kitchen, and I've never had a fire in my kitchen. Why do we have fire extinguishers in the kitchen?
Just in case.
There you go. And so having some extra food and water set aside, maybe flashlight and batteries and an emergency radio, some of your real basic stuff, you know what? It's there just in case. The cost typically is nominal, and if that makes you feel better, then that's great. And if you want to go a little more in depth and have some more fancy, some more expensive toys, I guess you could say, if that makes you feel better, that's fine as well. What I discovered in my personal, I guess you could call it a quest, I guess, for lack of a different term, is it's like dealing with any other kind of event. It can be traumatic at some point because it's you're right, you get overwhelmed. You can become obsessive. For a while, I became obsessive. My wife wasn't too happy with me a lot of times, simply because I would be like, oh my gosh, we have to look at this, we have to look at this. And now I've gotten to the point where, okay, I have enough stuff that I don't really have to worry. And now I look at it more as a hobby. And I think that's the point where it makes you better able to share information, because I'm not really looking for information. I have the answers I need and I want, and now I'm better able to answer questions because I'm not in that frenzy to, oh, I have to learn this or I have to do this. There's things that I've accepted that, you know what, I'm not going to know, and stuff that I feel is important, I've taken the steps to learn.
Right. Well, as the main organizer for the group, I'm sure you have been in contact with probably everybody, because I think everybody contacts you through the site and,
yes,
and asks information like where the meeting's going to be, and I'm sure they have tons of questions. So having pretty much talked to all the members, is there a common consensus on what people are concerned about, or are they just trying to get prepared in general?
Well, I wouldn't really say it's a main consensus, but I will tell you this. There's three main concerns. You have the first group, which are truly novices to preparing, and they're interested in just the basic general stuff, the basic general knowledge. That is easily 1/3 of the group. The second third of the group, the primary concern has to do with the economy, financial collapse, that type of thing, devaluing of the dollar, so on and so forth. And then the third component of the group is really concerned about either EMP or solar flare activity. That really has been a big hot button lately. So that's really how it breaks down into three. A lot of the other stuff, no one has really expressed a concern over like biological or chemical terrorism. No one has really expressed a concern over biological or chemical terrorism. Nobody has really expressed a whole lot of concern over definitely the 2012, the Mayan prophecy thing.
I actually would have expected to have a few more people concerned about that, because I think that's a big issue that we're seeing right now.
Well, you know, it's funny. People will ask about, well, you're preparing for the end of the world, and it's like, no, I'm not preparing for the end of the world.
Do you get that though from people who don't know, or people who are maybe the novices and they're concerned but they don't know what they're concerned about yet? I mean,
Yes.
or is that people who are just completely ignorant of what the preparedness movement is?
Well, I think anyone that's actually looking at preparedness has, before they've ever even come to the group, before they've ever actually talked to somebody, this is something that's really going on, and they're working it out in their head. And like anything, I know when I first started the group, I didn't know what to expect myself, to tell you the truth. I mean, I didn't know who would show up. I didn't know, if I was going to have people in foil hats showing up, and we've been really fortunate. We have very normal people. We have lots of professionals from all walks of life, from physicians to accountants to financial people. I mean, it's surprising the number of well-educated people we have in the group, and that tells me that this is a concern, and this is not a fringe type of movement. This is, people are legitimately concerned over whatever it is in the world that's going on right now that bothers them, and it varies for everybody.
That doesn't really surprise me, because I personally think that preppers are some of the smartest bears in the forest. They see what's going on. They're not afraid to ask questions of, what if this happens? Well, what if the dollar does collapse? Everybody else says, that's not going to happen. But, the smarter bears are saying, well, what if it does? What if, this big earthquake does happen? What if, I lose my job? And they're not afraid to look at those questions head on. And so I used to think that preppers, back long ago when I was getting into this, I used to think that, we're a really odd duck. And actually back then we probably were, because there really wasn't that many people in it right now. But I think that the economy has kind of forced a lot of people to say, hey, things aren't always as stable as we thought they were. And I think it's the smarter ones who are actually saying, I think I need to do something about this so I can make sure I can protect my family.
Well, I agree. And it's a lot of, it's really nice when someone from the other side of the tracks kind of comes into our fold. And I'll give you an example. My brother, for instance, my younger brother, is extremely successful. He has always thought that, I'm the crazy older brother. I'm, a survivalist. I'm a this, I'm a that. And he always, every chance he gets to take a shot at me, believe me, he has. Recently, he has been with the company he works with. He's been traveling abroad extensively. Not just in Mexico, but South America, Europe, all these different places. And recently he called me and said, hey, I need your help with this because I've been overseas and I hear what the other countries are saying about us. And he's like, now that I've had a look into the box from the outside, he said it concerns me. And he goes, I'm not ready to come to your meetings yet. I'm not ready to take that step. But he's like, look, I need some help. And he was like, what can I do to start preparing? And whatever it was, he didn't really share with me exactly what it was that happened or he heard or he saw or whatever it was. But it was enough that I could tell you it did scare him. And my brother has been a staunch opponent of prepping. And for him to switch, I can tell you that something really rattled his cage.
That's very interesting. But apparently it seems like a lot of people have that sort of epiphany moment where they're like, Okay, the last thing I want to cover for this session is survival psychology. Fred, in your opinion, what is the driving force of survival psychology?
Well, I think it's broken into a couple things. I think one is your attitude. I believe that most preppers are positive or optimistic people because you're looking at bad events and how are you going to overcome them. So I think, one, you have to be positive. Two, I think it has to do with confidence. confidence in your ability. I learned in the military when I was in the service was, you know what, we trained and trained and trained, and with that training, you became more confident because you were able to overcome obstacles or situations because of the training. You know, you hear it all the time. The training will kick in. Well, guess what? It really does. And I think in preparedness or in the psychology of survival, it's paramount. You have training. It doesn't have to be extensive training. You don't have to be some special forces guy. You don't have to be any of that. But you know what? If you have the skills and you develop them and you practice them to maintain an adequate level of skill, I think that builds confidence, and that makes you a positive person because you are confident in your ability. Do I feel I know everything? Absolutely not. Can I build a fire? Can I filter water? Can I build a basic shelter? Yes, I can. I can do those things. I can do a lot of other skills. The thing is, what I've learned through this whole process is that I can't do everything. And to think for a minute that, ooh, I can learn and I can teach myself to do everything, you know what? You can't. You really can't. Give you a perfect example. I can do a lot of things, but I cannot grow anything to save my life. I have tried growing some of the basic stuff. I have tried square foot gardening. I've tried, container gardening. You know what? Everything I grow dies. And so for me, part of getting this group together was me learning maybe how I can do this, or if anything, meeting somebody that they can grow stuff and they lack other skills, and guess what? Maybe we can team up and come together in some way if there is some kind of disaster. So I think a lot of psychology just has to do with confidence in your ability, regardless of whatever your skill set is. If you have made basic plans and you have stuff set aside, guess what? That gives you confidence in knowing that, oh, okay, the power's not on. Well, I have enough water to last me X amount of days. So now that's one less thing I have to stress about. Or if I have food in the pantry, or if I have long-term food stored, these are all things that it just takes that much more weight out of the situation. One less thing you have to focus on. So now all I have to focus on is some other basic things, other basic needs.
Right, and that's like one of the things that we are covering here on the podcast is that preparedness gives you options and opportunities you wouldn't have if you weren't prepared.
Exactly.
Well, Fred, I want to thank you for coming on this podcast. And to the listeners, I just want to say that we took this time to get to know Fred a little bit, so you know who he is and where he comes from, and a little bit about the Preparedness 101 group that he organizes. Going forward, this is going to be a mini-series. These will be marked as Prep 101 in the title. And the reason, one of the reasons we want to do is not only for the members of Preparedness 101, but also, like Fred was saying, his brother suddenly, after so many years, is like, gee, can you help me get prepared? What do we need to do? Well, my goal is that to take these podcasts that I do with Fred and make a little mini-series within the Preparedness podcast so that, if you have that opportunity to help somebody else get prepared, you can point them to this series and they'll be able to learn a lot, and then you can help them with the preparations that they need to make. So folks, this wraps up this episode of the Preparedness Podcast. I want to thank you for downloading and listening. I really do appreciate it. If you could do me a favor and spread the word that we're back with a new series. Until next time, folks, enjoy life and stay safe.